The Gabonese government says all is quiet following Monday's failed coup attempt. The Democratic Republic of Congo's election results are postponed as officials ask the public to remain patient. And deadlocked over border wall funding, the U.S. government remains partially closed for a third straight week, with no end in sight. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We begin our broadcast tonight in the Central African country of Gabon, where the capital city, Libreville, is quiet and firmly in control of the government following a failed coup. A government spokesman says 4 military officers were arrested in the early hours on Monday at a state radio station after broadcasting their dissatisfaction with President Ali Bongo. We get more in this late report from Megan Revel.
Gabonais.
Soldiers have staged an apparent coup attempt in Gabon. A small group of military officers seized the state radio station in the Central African nation early on Monday and spoke out against President Ali Bongo, who is recovering from a stroke in Morocco. 4 of the 5 military officers responsible have been arrested, according to a government spokesman. Lieutenant Kelly Ondo Obiang is the leader of the self-declared patriotic movement of the Defense and Security Forces of Gabon. He broadcast this message, expressing doubts over Bongo's ability to do his job. The 59-year-old president was hospitalized in October after suffering a stroke. He's been in Morocco since November to continue treatment. The oil-producing African country has been ruled by the Bongo family for nearly half a century. But the president's re-election in 2016 was marred by deadly protests amid claims of fraud. The lieutenant in charge said the coup was against, quote, those who, in a cowardly way, assassinated our young compatriots on the night of August the 31st, 2016, referring to the violence that erupted after Bongo was declared the winner. A Reuters witness said they heard sporadic gunfire and that the army used tear gas to disperse around 300 people who gathered at the radio station in support of the coup. But for now, the country's capital, Libreville, remains largely calm.
Well, that was Megan Revel of Reuters reporting. Join me now to discuss today's events in Gabon is VOA's Idris Fall. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Vincent.
Now, first we get this report that it's like 4 guys who just turned up and went to a radio station and said the government is being overthrown. Is it so? Just 4 guys? From what you're hearing?
They are now saying 6.
Yeah.
Okay, they come early in the morning at the national radio and television and took the mic for 3 minutes to say that they want to help the country get out of this chaos. They want to restore democracy, and they go calling all the Gabonese to revolt. And then they were surrounded by the army, and it lasts at least 5 hours. At the end, the government said that 2 of them were killed and their chief was arrested.
Is it possible that actually there's perhaps a backstory, perhaps a bigger story than this, or is that...
Well, for the time being, it's too early to say that, because when you prepare a coup, you better have a heavy backup.
Yes.
And it did not look like the army was backing them up. It did not look like the population was supporting them. So you have a small revolt in the poor neighborhood of Kokoche, but it did not last. Yeah. And since you arrested, it's very calm. People are not outside because they are scared. The security forces are patrolling inside Libreville, and I even haven't heard a reaction from the opposition. Opposition, especially Jean Ping, who in 2016, he's saying that he is the elected president. So,
he hasn't spoken.
Yeah.
And now something about about Gabon. We know that the country has been in the hands of the Bongo family. Now the current president is in fact in a neighboring country, in another country, recuperating from some ailment.
Well, I think the government did not handle very well the communication issue on the health of the president. He got a cardiovascular attack in Saudi Arabia, stayed there weeks. It was his wife who was communicating, telling that my husband going to come out of hospital, go to Morocco where he still is. He did an address to the nation through TV at New Year's Eve. And they did not handle it very well. It's normal that even when you are president, you got sick. but the communication was not very well handled, and he's still there.
Well, we'll keep monitoring the situation, perhaps to know more about what happens to those soldiers. Idris, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. That's Idris Fall, VOA journalist. Meanwhile, the U.S. Africa Command on Monday says the failed coup attempt in Gabon has not yet changed the mission of U.S. troops deployed there last week in response to potential violence nearby Democratic Republic of Congo. For more on that story and the reported U.S. troops drawdown in Somalia, VOA Pentagon correspondent Caleb Babb joins me live via Skype from the U.S. Defense Headquarters in Arlington. Hello.
Hi, Vincent.
Let's first talk about the U.S. troops in Gabon. It raised suspicion, especially after this attempted coup.
That's right, Vincent. I have seen the conspiracy theories on the internet, but I can assure you that officials here at the Pentagon say that there is absolutely no connection between the coup attempt and the U.S. troops that are in Gabon. Those, as you mentioned, were deployed last week, January 2nd, and they were deployed in response to the situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, the United States has a military location there, a cooperative security location. That's what the Pentagon speak for that place is. And they can increase and decrease the number of troops there as the security situation commands. And so they put these extra troops there because that security location in Gabon is actually the closest one to the DRC. So officials tell me they're trying to cut reaction time if needed to help with security situation there in DRC.
And as always, sending troops or withdrawing troops always raises suspicion. NBC is reporting that the U.S. will reduce troops in Somalia. What are you hearing on the corridors of the Pentagon?
Well, I know that was what has been reported, but every official that I've spoken to here in the building, outside of the building, they say there is absolutely no change to U.S. military posture in Somalia. The mission there hasn't changed at all. If you remember, I told you in November, Vincent, that the U.S. military did review U.S. Africa Command, and they decided to cut Africa Command's presence on the continent, but that wasn't in Somalia. That was over in West Africa. There's going to be about 700 American troops, mostly counterterrorism forces, withdrawn from West Africa, but they've been very clear here at the Pentagon. The Somalia operations, the Djibouti operations, the operations in Libya, they're going to stay the same.
And, of course, the strikes that have been accomplished so far still have been effective from all this.
Right. I know that the reporting had mentioned the strikes, and strikes obviously ebb and flow based on the intelligence of the targeting. You can't just say, oh, next week there are going to be 4 strikes. It doesn't work that way. There has to be the intelligence there first. I know that there were about just a fewer than 50 strikes last year, about 35 in 2017, and there's no indication on whether these will increase or decrease, but that's not tied to the mission itself, just if the strikes happen to go down.
Well, Carla, thank you very much. Thank you for your excellent reporting, as always. That's a VOA Pentagon correspondent, Carla Babb, reporting live via Skype from the U.S. Defense Headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. Now, across the continent in East Africa, riot police fired tear gas at thousands of protesters Sunday in Sudan's capital. This demonstrators calling for longtime President Omar al-Bashir to step down continued for the 3rd week. Crowds of protesters gathered in Khartoum, heeding a call from the Sudanese Professionals Association, a group of doctors, teachers, and engineers that have called for strikes and demonstrations during the past month. Police responded by firing tear gas to disperse crowds. Sudan's government says 19 people have been killed since the protests erupted on December 19th. But human rights groups, Amnesty International, says 37 people have been killed in the protests. Authorities have closed schools and declared curfews and states of emergency in several regions. Food prices in Sudan have climbed sharply in recent months, with inflation topping 60%. President Bashir came to power in a 1989 military coup. Well, as Africa enters the new year, we can't predict the news, but we can give you a glimpse of what to expect in some parts of the continent. From elections in several countries to climate change and global conventions across Africa, here are some of the stories we'll be tracking in 2019.
Africa enters the new year with a humanitarian crisis that stretches across the continent and into Europe. The African Union has declared 2019 the year of refugees, returnees and internally displaced persons. More than 6 million African refugees and asylum seekers have fled their nations. 12 million more are on the run inside their own countries. 2019 will be a chance for the AU to tackle root causes, conflict, violence and natural disasters. From the World Economic Forum on Africa, trade shows and art exhibitions to conferences on health, science, innovation and women's empowerment, Africa has become a popular meeting point. Climate change will be the talk of the town in Accra, Ghana this June during Africa Climate Week. The summit will look at how to ramp up action and financing for climate-smart development. Global aviation experts will meet in Cape Town and Kigali this year as growing affluence on the continent creates greater demand for air travel. 2019 will be pivotal for nations seeking change and second chances. There is hard work ahead for Ethiopia as Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed looks to follow through on the dramatic economic and political reforms he introduced last year. Zimbabwe enters 2019 trying to rebuild its cash-strapped economy and recover from decades of rule by Robert Mugabe. The Democratic Republic of Congo is on edge following the December 30th vote to choose a new president. With fears of electoral fraud and post-election violence, the chances of a peaceful transition are unclear. Nigerians go to the polls next month. President Muhammadu Buhari will face off against Atiku Abubakar amid concerns over security, a struggling economy and rampant corruption. In South Africa, a litmus test for the ruling African National Congress in elections set for March. Even as President Cyril Ramaphosa tries to shake off his party's corruption scandals and shake up the economy, the question is whether opposition parties will gain traction. Also looking for another chance, Malawi's former president Joyce Banda. She returned to the country last year after 4 years of self-imposed exile. Banda is set to face off against President Peter Mutharika at the polls in May. Sports will take center stage in June with the Africa Cup of Nations. Defending champions Cameroon are looking to claim their second successive title. That nation lost the right to host the tournament over preparation delays and security concerns. A new host country will be announced in coming days.
Well, that was Africa 54's Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick reporting. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, citizens are still on edge, anxiously awaiting the official results from the December 30th presidential elections. On Monday, the Electoral Commission said it will delay the publication of the final tally until it had consolidated all the votes it's receiving from the polling stations. Sunday was the deadline for the publication of provisional results, but the Commission had received only 50% of the vote tally sheets, and it was not yet clear when the results would be ready. Congolese in the capital city of Kinshasa say they're hungry for the election results. The delay is the latest setback in a disorganized poll to pick a successor to President Joseph Kabila, who has ruled the country of 80 million people since his father was assassinated in the year 2008.
Everybody knows that we voted for our President Martin Fayulu. Everybody knows that. But with everything they're doing, these are just stories. We are waiting for the publication of the election. We are here for them, tooth for tooth, an eye for an eye.
We are worried that because you can see yourself, children are not going to school because of the tension here and there. Maybe there will be trouble. Children can't go and study, and yet the future of the Congo is in their hands. The hands of these children are at school. The CENI must be able to publish these results as fast as possible so that all the Congolese citizens may go back to work.
Yeah, Laurent Kabila was assassinated in 2001. Now, Congo's Catholic Church body, Senegal, they say, says it has identified the winner of the election based on its own tallies reported by 40,000 observers. Although it did not name the winner, the church's declaration is widely seen as a warning to authorities against rigging the vote. For more insight on the nation's rising election tension, I'm joined by Paul Nantulia, an analyst and researcher for the National Defense University's Africa Center for Strategic Studies. Paul, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be back as always.
Yeah, now, first, the Electoral Commission and the DSC and the government promised that they will hold the election in a free, fair, and open fashion, and hopefully release the results on time. What's your take from what you've been seeing? What's your assessment?
Well, there's a lot of anger, both within the population, as well as the opposition parties, that the process has been marred by a lot of irregularities. If you look at the report that Senko released, there were quite a number of many polling stations that did not open on time. The internet has been shut off. The ruling party has had more coverage in the media than other parties, and of course the government remains firmly in control of the instruments of violence, the military, the intelligence. So going into the election, there was a lot of concern that the electoral environment was not conducive for a free and fair poll. But nevertheless, Congolese have turned out in huge numbers, and that is where some of this anger is coming from.
Yes. Now, when the Electoral Commission came out, especially after the burning of the electoral material in Kinshasa, the Electoral Commission said, regardless of that, we're going to hold the elections on time. And then a few days just before the election, they said, well, we may not be able to hold elections, actually, not only in Kinshasa, but actually way in the east because of Ebola, because of some kind of history of violence in some of those provinces. Now, they knew all that before. Did you get some insight as to why did they wait until the last minute to announce that?
Well, the thing is that it wasn't new. There's been a pattern. We've seen a pattern of behavior, since 2016, even earlier. We've seen a pattern of, the use of legal tools to effectively delay the elections. We've seen a number of bills that have been passed in Parliament, which controlled by dominated by the ruling party, that have tilted the election environment firmly to the to the ruling party. We've also seen a number of there's been delays. I mean, this is not the first time that the polls have been delayed, and so there's been a sense within the Congolese population, and certainly which has been articulated very well by the opposition and by Senko, as well as the Congo's regional and international partners, that these delays have really been calculated at enabling Kabila and his colleagues to sort of retain control and to influence an outcome that would be favorable to them.
Now, the opposition, especially Mr. Fayulu, is saying they know very well that they've won. He believes he has won the election. The church is saying, the Catholic Church is saying that they already know who has won, although they're not saying who exactly.
Right.
Now, the government side, of course, says they believe they won this election. What do you think this could lead to if eventually we get the final results?
Well, I mean, there are a number of scenarios. The first scenario is, Kabila and Shadari are persuaded to announce, the authentic results. I think there's a consensus right now that, when you look at what Senko is saying and when you look at the statements that have been released by the Southern African Development Community, as well as the United States, the European Union, that that these results have got to reflect the will of the Congolese people. So it's so there's that sense. The other element to it is the churches deployed over 40,000 poll monitors. So there's a sense of it's a very credible institution. It's a respected institution in Congo, and there's a sense that with them having come out in this way and said that they do know that there is a winner, there's a clear winner, and sort of applying pressure on the government to announce the results. There's a sense that that was quite strategic on their part to kind of deter any attempt to falsify or to declare results that that do not reflect the true tally. So it's anyone's guess, but one cannot rule out the potential for violence. These elections have been delayed for 2 years. There's a groundswell of support for the poll. There's a lot of diplomatic engagements right now that are going on with the African Union and other countries. So, you know, one cannot rule out the potential for violence. But on the other hand, if we have a transition that reflects the pole, then it would be a good thing for the continent.
And we hope there's no violence. Paul, we do appreciate very much your insights on this. That's Paul Nantulia, who is an analyst and researcher for the National Defense University's Africa Center for Strategic Studies. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now, still ahead on Africa 54, the U.S. government remains partially closed. We'll have the latest, but first, a look at Monday's headlines.
Gabonais, chers compatriotes, je suis le lieutenant Ondo Biankelibé, commandant adjoint à la
Ceux qui pensent qu'ils peuvent influencer la décision de la CENI, non, la CENI va annoncer les résultats.
After an official inauguration last month, Senegal has finally opened the Museum of Black Civilizations to the general public. Rick Shayok reports from Dakar.
Senegal's Museum of Black Civilizations opened its doors to the public this week. The four-story structure is home to one of Africa's largest art collections and has room for 18,000 works of art. Visitors on the first day expressed enthusiasm for the new institution.
I love it. It's really impressive. It's really magnificent to have so much brought together here, because it is from here. It is from Africa.
The museum opening comes amid global calls for European countries to return African art looted during the colonial era. A recent report commissioned by French President Emmanuel Macron identified 46,000 objects at the Musée du Quai Branly Museum in Paris that would qualify for repatriation. Corinne Jan from Texas visited the museum on opening day with her husband Amdalai Jan, who grew up in Senegal. She thinks European countries should return the artifacts.
It's the time to do it. I think this will be a great way to be able to bring the African art back to Africa and give people a central location that they can go and see it.
Museum director Hamidi Boukoum said the museum will be a space for conversation on a global scale.
The challenge was to create an articulate and consensual language. It's not a museum for Senegal, it's not a museum for Africa, it's not a museum for the diaspora. It's a museum of black civilizations throughout the world.
With contemporary exhibits as well at the museum, artists from Dakar hope the museum can also lend exposure to the city's present-day vibrant art scene.
Le musée est récent, mais déjà il a une couverture internationale.
The museum is recent, but already it has international coverage, and I think that can bring us a lot of credibility for Senegalese artists and contemporary African artists.
For now, the new museum's workers are happy to welcome visitors. Soon, many in Senegal and beyond hope the museum can also welcome African art back to the continent. Ricky Shayok for VOA News, Dakar, Senegal.
The U.S. government is partially closed for a third straight week with no end in sight as President Donald Trump resolutely demands funding for a wall construction along U.S.-Mexico border, and Democratic lawmakers continue to rule it out. VOA's Michael Bowman reports.
Across America, numerous federal operations remain shuttered or scaled back In Washington, a deal to end the shutdown is nowhere to be seen, with neither President Donald Trump nor Democrats backing down.
If we don't find a solution, it's going to go on for a long time. There's not going to be any bend right here.
We're not doing a wall. Does anybody have any doubt that we're not doing a wall?
Trump insists the shutdown will continue until Democrats change their tune.
We have to build the wall or we have to build the barrier. The barrier or the wall can be of steel instead of concrete if that helps people. It's about security for our country. It's about stopping human traffickers. It's about stopping drugs. So we have to have it, gotta have it. We have no choice.
Democrats' message to Trump: don't hold your breath.
It has to do with the wall is an immorality between countries. It's an old way of thinking. It isn't cost effective.
The yeas are 241 and the nays are 190.
Last week, Democrats used their new majority in the House of Representatives to pass a spending bill to reopen the federal government and temporarily fund border security, but not a wall. Republicans, who retained their Senate majority, declined to vote on either measure. Repeated meetings between congressional leaders and White House officials have not broken the impasse.
We want to go back to work. We need to go back to work because we have bills to pay.
For now, hundreds of thousands of government employees are furloughed or working without pay. Some have begun to protest.
We have money saved up, but if this continues to go on, we're going to deplete our savings.
Trump says federal workers will adjust to the situation.
But many of those people that won't be receiving a paycheck, many of those people agree 100% with what I'm doing.
Polling data show more Americans blame Trump than Democrats for the shutdown, with a majority saying they do not support border wall funding. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. The non-profit organization Growing Champions is working to empower and inspire youth living in a poor and violent town outside Johannesburg, South Africa, by changing their lives through sports. El Dorado Park is notorious for drug-related crime, topping the list in Gauteng province with more than 2,000 incidents reported in 2018. Growing Champions was inspired by the fighting spirit of the late Willie Terwell, one of South Africa's greatest boxers. The organization relies on locals who have overcome substance abuse and gangs to empower and uplift kids from troubled townships through a football leadership and development program. And that's our show for today. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good night.